and I've been more productive in the last 4 to 6 weeks than I think I've ever been previously.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Jo's interviewing Andy Lopata. Jo came across Andy in the early days of her business when she was growing it predominantly by networking. Andy wrote the book about networking, and Death Came Third, the title of which Jo regularly quoted in those early days. Labelled Mr. Network by The Sun, Andy was called one of Europe's leading business networking strategists by the Financial Times and a true master of networking by The Independent. A very experienced international speaker, Andy is the author of 3 books on networking, has been quoted in a number of other business books, and is regularly quoted in the international press. His 4th book will be published by Bloomsbury Publishing in 2020. Andy is a fellow of the Professional Speaking Association, PSA, and of the Learning Performance Institute, and a master of the Institute for Sales Management. He is also one of just 23 recipients of the PSA's top honour, the Award for Excellence. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Andy Lopata, author, professional speaker and professional relationship strategist. Welcome, Andy. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jo.
So we're joining from week 1 of my lockdown. I think pretty much yours from what I've said as well. So it's I don't normally sort of time checkers, but we're at the end of March, just in case anyone's listening in future and wonders what we're talking about in the midst of the coronavirus at the moment, aren't we? So thanks for taking the time to join me, and start by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and crucially where you do it.
Well, at the moment I do it from my home office, and that's, I think, at the time we're recording, that's what everyone could say. My business is, as you mentioned, focused on professional relationships. So I work with my clients to help them build those relationships in the right places, to nurture them and develop them to the point where they're strong and where people want to support them, and also to leverage that support as well. So that would encompass a whole range of things, from referral strategies, influence strategies, right the way through to the type of support networks, mentoring, and the ability to be vulnerable that's so important in the modern day. And in terms of where I do it, it's where, once we're allowed back out into society again, it's where people want me. So interestingly, I've been on a journey over the last few months where I'm pivoting a lot of my business towards mentoring, particularly at senior leader level, and looking at how their professional relationship strategy can impact their footprint in their industry, within their organisation, and more generally. So there's that element, but I'm a speaker as well and an author, so I'm very fortunate that my work has stretched around the world.
Yes. So I'm really interested to sort of find where this all came from, because in common with many of my guests, I don't suppose you grew up thinking that this is what you would do. But also I've followed along with you for a long time, from when I first started my business. And in fact, I've often thought to myself, given my skills, I thought, I need to make money out of being a networker. And I remember right back in the early days, that's what I saw you doing. And I thought, can do it, clearly. But you've changed and your business has evolved since. So sort of talk us through a bit of where it came from.
Yeah, well, first of all, just on that point, because I do hear people talk about being a professional networker, and I never describe myself as that. And it's not something I'm a big fan of. There are people who do that. But I see networking as a tool to help you in your business. not as a business per se. The only difference would be networking groups, which is a business per se, and then you use networks and networking to grow those as well. But the business is events effectively when you're in that business. I've been in this space for 21 years. So 21 years ago, I quit my job working for a corporate, said I'd never work for anyone else again, and said I'd be a freelance writer. And around the same time, in fact, about 6 months earlier, my father had co-founded a business networking organization. And he said, come and help us out. And it was as simple as that. While you wait to get some writing commissions, come and give us a hand. And you know, it was networking was something that until my dad started the groups, I don't think I'd ever heard the term. And you know, you're talking about the 1999. It wasn't prevalent in the UK. People weren't talking about networking groups and networking in the same way as we do nowadays. So I hadn't really come across the term, but it was something I did naturally. So I sort of fell into that, and things evolved from there.
It's funny, I realised that a few years ago I went to a school reunion and there were like 50 people in the room, and I didn't really know any of them very well, but I did know every one of them to have a personal conversation with. And I realised then that I'd clearly been a networker at school, and again, not something I'd sort of really thought about because it wasn't a concept, was it? But I imagine you were the same from what you've just said, having that sort of
I don't know about at school. When I've reconnected with people from my earlier school days, yeah, there's only a handful that I've really connected with a reasonable level. Some I can't even, friends mention names to me and I can't remember who they are. My school days weren't necessarily where I came into my element. I think it was sixth form in university, and afterwards I discovered my true self. Right,
yeah. So you've talked about pivoting your business now, and I've seen you do that, I think, before, given I'd forgotten about the networking group. Actually, that's where I first came across you.
Right.
So that's, I have truly followed along. And I've got your book. You had a book, didn't you, back in the day?
Well, actually, I've published 3, and my 4th has just finished the 4th manuscript of the 4th book. So I'm guessing, is it And Death Came Third that you have a copy of?
Yes, I remember the title now. Yes.
Yes,
exactly.
That was my second book. Yeah.
Lovely. So I probably quoted you on many occasions in the past, and then we bumped into each other at an event a couple of years ago, which is how you've ended up on the podcast. So it was great to meet you. But where do all those changes come from? Because people are talking all the time about pivoting their business, and I guess we're in a massive phase where that's going to need to happen for many people. What's prompted that for you, and how easy has it been to do that, and what sort of steps have you taken?
Right. Well, it's 2 very different pivots. So the first one was when my father and I sold our shares in the networking groups to our business partner. That was about a year or 2 years in the making, and that was because a couple of things had happened. My role changed. I was managing director. I was working with the franchisees, and I wasn't enjoying the work. For the first time in 7 years of running them, I wasn't enjoying it. I was firefighting. Our franchise model wasn't strong enough, and it was constant firefighting, and we weren't growing. The growth had gone well, but it was sort of slowing up a bit. So I wasn't enjoying things, and I also looked at our model. I was trying to change a lot, and our structure was such that it was almost impossible to make fundamental changes, and I felt that the business needed those changes to survive. So it took about a year to persuade my father that we needed to change, and I needed to bring him with me, and I wanted to really focus on training and speaking, the type of business that I have now. And it took a long time to convince him. And actually, we did open a different business, which was a very early online network, an online version of what we were doing, called Word of Mouse, which wasn't successful at all, and basically swallowed up most of the money that we sold our business for. But eventually, we established and developed a business focused around speaking and training. So that was the first shift that took quite a while. I mean, with the word of mouth debacle, as I would probably call it, you'd probably look at 3 to 4 years in total before we really settled on a business that we followed for a long time. That business hasn't really changed to a large degree. What is changing is my focus within the business. So there have been 2 shifts more recently. In late 2019, around autumn 2019, I recognised that despite huge efforts over the years, I had failed dismally in my attempts to change perceptions about networking. And networking was still perceived as being about networking events. And that's only a tiny proportion of the work I've done for the last 12 years. So what I did was I repositioned myself rather than pivoted the business. And I repositioned around this topic of professional relationships, which is effectively what I was talking about, but I was shining a spotlight on that, which has had a big impact on how it's perceived in the marketplace, moving it away from just people thinking it's about networking events and much more understanding about the real impact that I seek to make. So I still teach networking, but it's a tiny proportion of what I teach. And ultimately that might be something that gets moved on to someone else. That was the repositioning. The pivot has come from looking at my business model and my revenue models and saying, well, it's not working at the moment and it's not bringing in consistently strong revenues at the level we need. So I've pivoted the business. So I still do the trading and I still run 1-year programs with clients, but they're not my prime focus now. And I'm repositioning the business to focus on mentoring and building from mentoring individuals to mentoring senior leaders and then into retreats and communities for senior leaders who want to focus on their professional relationships. So that becomes the core of the business, with the keynote speaking, which I really enjoy but haven't really focused on for the last few years, taking much more of a front seat, obviously once we're back to live events. And then the training and everything else comes after that. And I think that the coronavirus scenario we find ourselves in is sort of making me much more focused on product development as well. So I've written 4 books. I've got 2 online learning programs. I've recorded audio programs in the past, but I've not been very strategic about them. And I'm much more focused on that now. So I'm halfway through writing an ebook on connected leadership, which may well be published by the time this is broadcast. And I'll be looking at converting that into an online learning program as well. And then seeing where I can take that. And I've got a few ideas which are bubbling away at the moment about how I can develop that product side of my business. So this, I don't want to take away from the human cost of what's gone on with COVID-19. I'm a big football fan, and one of the best known supporters of our club, who was only 38, passed away yesterday because of coronavirus, COVID-19. So there's a huge human cost to that. And I think that whatever I say should not take away from that. And I know a lot of people whose businesses are in danger, and of course our business is in danger if I don't take the right action. I heard this morning, and I haven't checked if it's true, the Chinese have the same word for crisis and opportunity. So from that perspective, and that's why I wanted to put that disclaimer in, that I'm not taking away from the human cost of COVID-19, but from a business perspective, there is a potential opportunity out of this crisis, and it's giving me the time and the space to focus strategically that I've not had before. And as long as I can bring in enough money to keep the business rolling while I do this, then I think we could potentially come out of it a lot stronger than we were before.
As you say, just such a terrible time in terms of human loss and suffering and everything else. But also, I don't know if that's true. I've heard that before, the opportunity crisis thing. Let's just go with it, because I think it ought to be, even if it isn't. So what do you think, getting clear about what you enjoy and what you want to do is in terms of business? Because you mentioned that one of the reasons you moved out of the networking business with your father was because you weren't enjoying it. And I suspect some of the changes that you've mentioned since are similar. And quite often I don't think, start with things that we really enjoy. We start with what we think we should be doing. And eventually, I think a lot of people who've been in business over the last 20 years, there's been lots of changes in the last few years around people finding things that sort of light them up more than ever before. How important do you think that is?
I think it's massively important. We spend the majority of our lives working. And if we run our own business, we spend even more than most.
Yeah.
So you got to enjoy it if you can. I've had jobs I've hated. I was a tax collector at the beginning of my career. I was a social fund officer in the benefits agency. I enjoyed, actually, I did enjoy part of that. But I hated a lot of that. You know, when I was working for the benefits agency, I was commuting from Hendon to Croydon, which for anyone who's not based in London is a hell of a commute.
Yeah.
It's an hour and a half minimum each way, and you end up in Croydon at the end of it. That's not a good place to as a destination. Definitely not back then. I've just alienated anyone who lives in Croydon. And then you're going to work, you know, in the civil service, 1990s civil service environment, and I made myself unwell. I lost a relationship because of it. I was exhausted, and all of the office politics just dragged me down. I never want to repeat that experience again, put simply. I think it's massively important to love what you do, because it does impact the rest of your life. I lost a relationship because I hated my job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's, as I say, it's interesting how many people that I see have been around for the last sort of 15, 20 years are focusing so much more on that, you know, and it's coming out in terms of how they position their offering, and, you know, even some people have completely changed what they're doing, because, you know, that's suddenly become even more important. I always say I wish we could sort of teach that to the young people, but I've said recently I think all the millennials and the younger people are actually cracking that a lot better than we are.
There's elements of that. I interviewed my niece, funnily enough, for my new book, to understand generational differences in vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about her generation. She's 21, that I didn't quite get. Her undergraduate project in her first year at university was looking at why her generation is the loneliest generation. And we think that all of this connectivity makes their lives better, but it's really dragging them down in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the cyberbullying and so forth that we become increasingly aware of. I'm not sure they have got it cracked, I'll be honest. I think that there are elements, and I think they talk a good game sometimes, but they're going on a similar journey that we went on, from what I see.
Mm-hmm. So let's shift a bit to talking about how you work on a day-to-day basis, and clearly things are a bit different this week. But, you know, how do you get done what you need to get done? How do you organise yourself? What sort of strategies, tips and tools do you use?
Well, it's really good that we're having this conversation now and not 2 or 3 months ago, because up until 2 or 3 months ago, I was the epitome of disorganised, unstructured, lacking process, and just hope it all happens. And I've gone through a transformation. I'm on a business accelerator program called Change Your Game, which has really focused my mind and come at just the right time, and it's a root cause of a lot of the pivoting that I'm doing at the moment, and it's changed the way I work. So we have a book recommended to us to read every month, and one of those is a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport.
Yeah.
And that had a big impact on me. Not an easy read, not a flowing read, but I've probably taken away more from that book and applied than from any other book I've ever read. So now, as I sit talking to you in my office, I have in front of me, I have a small whiteboard, and on the small whiteboard I have all my monthly outcomes. So I have my bold goal, my essential goal, what needs to happen, what I'm going to do to build my profile, what I'm going to do to raise revenue, and then my micro goals. What do I need to do in order for these things to happen? And I have to tick those off as the month goes past. And all of those are ticked off for the last month. I've got my accelerator tomorrow for the month end. All of them are ticked off, apart from the ones that were just, knocked out of the park by the coronavirus changes.
Yeah.
Next on the wall is my year planner. And on the year planner, I have coloured stickers with numbers on them. And the coloured stickers represent either product development, talk development, so writing presentations and workshops, strategy, or sales and marketing activity. And my PA blocks off 90-minute slots in my diary for deep work using the Cal Newport title, and I will follow one of those activities in that time. And every day that every time I do one of those activities, I put the requisite sticker on that day on the year planner with the amount of time I spent on it. So I can look at it now. And I was bad this morning. I was meant to be writing my ebook. My head wasn't in the right space. There's going to be no deep work up there for 2 days. And I'm going to feel bad about that. And this week, it will be 3 days actually, because I've got the accelerator tomorrow. So tomorrow being a Friday. So this weekend, I will be looking to put deep work on there, even though it's a weekend. So it holds me to account. And if I look up there and I see no sales activity, for example, for 5 days, that sends me a very sharp message very quickly. And then the third thing is my big whiteboard. And on the big whiteboard, I have my 8 revenue streams in a column. And next to it, I have keynotes about leads, about actions I need to take, about ideas, whatever it might be around that. Now, that's fairly new. I'm not reviewing it as much as I can, so that needs to be reviewed once a week. And that will go into my diary as a big whiteboard review once a week. That activity has just shifted my focus, and I've been more productive in the last 4 to 6 weeks than I think I've ever been previously.
Wow. And were you a visual person before? As in, you've got all these things in front of you, which presumably are as you've said, helping to drive this stuff forwards. Would you have put stuff in front of yourself to keep you on track before?
Those whiteboards have been on my wall for about 6 years. This is the first time I've used them proactively. Does that answer that question? It's
got writing all over it. I've got blinds too, because it's been up there for so long. So maybe I need to.
It's been up too long when you have to really sort of put pressure on to try and wipe it off, even if it's on the dry white marker.
Yeah, it's definitely a water and soap version, I think.
Yeah.
Not there that long. Brilliant. So so motivational in terms of being able to make that change. What prompted you to do that? And it sounds like pretty transformational and quite quick. Is that how it's been? Has it felt like that? Has it been really hard work?
It's not been hard work because I've been energized by it. It goes back to the earlier question. I think if you're energized by things, then it's not hard work.
Yes.
Have I got tired because I've been thinking intensely, I've been very active, then yes. But I've been in action more than ever before. There were 2 catalysts. One was we had a bad year in 2019. We were on for a record year, and then for various reasons things just didn't come out of the pipeline, and for other various reasons there was no further pipeline behind them, partly because of complacency that there was so much in it in the first place. So something had to change in the business. So that was Catalyst 1. And Catalyst 2 was this business accelerator program I joined, and it just gave me the structure I needed for what I knew needed to happen.
Yes.
And I think that you can know you need to do things. You can watch as many TED videos as you like. But when I joined this accelerator program, I was asked, what do I most want to achieve from it? And my answer was implementation and accountability. I am a professional speaker. I am exposed to new ideas and great ideas on a regular basis. but how much I do with them is a completely different thing. But having to turn up regularly, we have a meeting, usually in person. Tomorrow will be virtual, but it'll be all day still. That's once a month. We have a Zoom call as a group once a month for a couple of hours, and then we have subgroups where we talk to each other every week, and in fact we're WhatsApping each other every day. So it's implementation and accountability, and I think that's what I need.
Yes,
Everyone's different. I've always said I need a managing director to tell me what to do, and that's effectively what I've now got.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting, actually. I was reading an email yesterday from a company I follow, Asian Efficiency. I don't know if you've come across them.
No.
And they've had something called a dojo for many years,
Yes,
which is where people join and they learn all about productivity and everything else. And it's funny, their monthly emails always like summarize their latest blog posts and the topics they're talking about and everything else. And I don't read them generally because there's just too much information in them.
Yeah.
And I noticed yesterday they emailed to say they're setting up like Dojo 2.0, which is going to be much more focused on implementation and taking action. And I thought, that you've just reminded me that came through yesterday. And so they've obviously ended up in a similar situation of loads of people navel gazing, talking about how important all this stuff is and learning about it. But what they've been missing is people actually, taking action with that, which I think is, as you say, so key to, it's great to learn lots of things, but if you don't put them into action, it's a waste of time, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it's not a waste of time if you've got time to do, if you're a multi-millionaire with no responsibilities and you can just sit around learning all the time, great.
But if you're not going to apply the learning, then I'm not quite. I read a lot of books, and until this program, I had stopped reading business and self-development books on the whole. Because I recognize I was reading and not applying.
Yes. Yeah.
This is, and I read, most of the books I read are non-fiction, and I'll read a lot of history books and political history and politics books, and biographies. But I'll forget most of what I've read after I've closed the cover. I've moved on to the next book. Little bits stick in there that I'm not aware of, but I'm not reading to learn. I'm reading to relax. And that's fine, because I'm not doing it for that purpose. But if you're reading a business book, then you want to be focused on what you're taking away.
Yeah, exactly. So what about keeping well for running your business, having the energy to do that? We talked before we came on line that you're doing your daily walk as part of the semi-lockdown that we're on.
Yeah.
Would you normally do that? I think some go out walking you don't normally.
I do go hiking with friends, and ideally we try and go once a month. And I'm in part of 2 or 3 groups of friends that organise hikes. So yes, I do, and I live in a part of the country just outside London where I'm by a river. We've got woods all around me. Basically, if you look at where I live on Google Maps, it's 2 miles wide, and on either side is river and woods. So when the weather's nice, I try to get out and enjoy that as well. Not daily, I should do daily, but I do try and get out there. Until the COVID-19 crisis, just before they closed them anyway, I had suspended my membership of the gym, but I was trying to get to the gym 3 times a week. Now, I also do Pilates. And I would say 3 to 5 times a week at least I would do 20 minutes Pilates minimum in the morning, just stretching. The people I'm in my little breakout group with on the Accelerator have a personal fitness company, Rock Solid Training, and they train people through video and through a community. So I've signed up with them. So I'm now taking the workouts home. I've got kettlebells being delivered by Amazon some point this week. I did try and order a suspension training system for home today, but now deliveries are going into May on Amazon, unfortunately. And it's now the end of March. But I will probably get those because it may well be that I get into a routine, and I'd rather do 40 minutes in the morning from home every day or 6 days a week than an hour in the gym 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And face like the journey either side and so on. So it might shift how I stay fit. And then, as I say, I've got the Pilates and the walking on top of it.
I was saying to the family as we're now ensconced that we should put in a little sort of daily exercise thing. So far, all we've managed to do is a game of table tennis at lunchtime yesterday.
No, well, it's easy. You know, when we're recording this, the weather's been glorious this week.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get out there and enjoy it. The forecast for the weekend is not so glorious, so it'll be easier to stay in and not do anything.
No.
And I think that's a big driver for people, and that's why I think having, I try not to overload my home with equipment, but I have a little corner that's set aside for equipment anyway. So a couple of little things that will fit in there are fine. I just don't want it taking over my home.
No.
But if I can transition to that, then it doesn't matter what the weather is. I can still work out.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. What about when you're not working? You talked a bit about you have a job that you need to like because you're there a lot, but when you've got your own business, you're doing even more sort of thing. What about switching off and stopping, particularly for people working from home? I mean, and for me, having a husband who normally works in an office, I've just noticed how I not swan around, but I do this, I do that, I go and do that, I make a cup of coffee, I do the washing or whatever, and I work in between times or vice versa, which I feel you say is the most important. He, I think, is in danger of hyper-focusing because he's so used to distractions and he doesn't really have them here that I think he's doing too much work at the moment and he's got to try and change how he works because he's now in a different environment. What sort of do you stop your work at a certain time of day, or do you integrate the two things? How do you manage your working from home bit so that you don't just do it all the time?
I tend to be very disciplined on it. So I was worried when I first started working from home quite a few years ago, back when I was running the networking group. So that would be maybe we sold those in 2007. So well over a decade ago. We had 5 people in the office and I couldn't get any work done because people would talk to me when I was concentrating. Quite ironic because I was in a networking organization. But I came and worked from home more of the time. So it was a more natural transition for me. In 2011, I had 2 books come out. So I had the second edition of And Death Came Third, and I had my 3rd book recommended come out in the same year. So I found myself working a lot of evenings and a lot of weekends. And my girlfriend at the time was very understanding and a saint and didn't complain. But I looked and I saw what was happening and I said, that's it. When these books are done, unless I'm writing books or something like that, obviously if I'm speaking at a weekend, then that's fine. But it has to be essential for me to work at the weekend. So I've actually had weekends where I've had nothing on and I force myself not to work because I don't think it's healthy. But there are times when you do. So this weekend, I will probably do 4 hours work over the weekend because I haven't got where I want to on this ebook and I need to get it out there. But that's, if I'm writing, then that's a different time. But I'll get up at a reasonable time. I'm not an early morning person, although that's my most creative time, but I'm not a good riser. But I've been getting up earlier and earlier, 6:30 to 7 now. I take my time in the morning, do a workout, do my stretching, make a nice breakfast. I don't rush, but I'm at my desk probably by between 8:30 and 9:30, depending on the range of things. And then I work for the day. I'll take up to an hour for lunch. I have no problem with doing that. I take a break. In the afternoon, I tend to be less productive. So what I try and do is schedule calls and deal with email in the afternoon and do my creative work in the morning. And then I will finish probably around 5:30, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. It doesn't, it's rare I'll be at my desk after 6 unless I need to. I think you do have to have that break. And I'm not productive at that time. So what's the point? But if someone calls me up to a reasonable hour, I'll pick it up. If someone calls me on work after, say, 6:45, 7, I'll probably let it ring out unless I know it's urgent. Because I think, people can blur their lines for themselves, and that's one thing. But don't blur the lines for other people. And I think it will be easier for me to pick up because I'm single. If you're in a family, I think that would be wrong. But why should I be penalised? I should be creating that right environment for me now, so that when I am in a relationship, it's not a shift.
No.
I don't have bad habits. So, I'm in and out of relationships so that so come to me for professional relationship advice, not personal relationship advice. But that means that I'm not carrying bad habits into a relationship with me.
No.
But no, I think that you should separate work and your personal life. Otherwise, it just can take over.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just reflecting as you're talking about that structure that I've instigated a 1:00 lunch in the house as we're all now here, because otherwise we were doing our own thing at different times and not actually seeing each other all day, which seemed a bit odd as we were all in the same house. And so I said, I've got a pre-booked thing at 1:00 today, so I can't do lunch. And I've just realised nobody else has done lunch either.
and my stomach is rumbling.
Oh, we're nearly done, don't worry.
No, it's fine. It's just like, why were we booked in at 1:00? But anyway, it's all good.
Exactly. So, improving yourself, you've talked about how you knew that you were doing lots of that and not actually implementing it, and you've made a big change with that. Is there other stuff you're still doing now, or is it very much the program and that's it?
Sorry, what can you?
The learning and improving yourself. You said that you got into the sort of habit of reading stuff and not implementing it, and so you decided that wasn't what you were going to do. But then obviously you started the program, and part of that, ironically, you're now reading books. Yeah. Is there other stuff you're doing, or are you really sort of focusing on that program?
Yeah, I read a lot anyway. I mean, I always read a lot, but I was reading more for leisure than learning. I read 52 books last year, and I think 55 the year before. So I'm quite an avid reader.
Yeah.
I listen to podcasts in the same way, but most of the podcasts I listen to are sports or music or comedy related. They're related. Yeah. There's one that sort of crosses the line a little bit and is self-developmental that I enjoy. But other than that, I don't tend to listen to business podcasts that often. Obviously, this one will buck the trend, and I'll start listening to yours. What else am I doing? Well, it's taking up a lot of my time. I'm a member of the Professional Speaking Association, and I have been since 2003. In fact, I'm on the board now, and I will engage with PSA events a lot, particularly now a lot of them are virtual. So I get a lot of learning from that, and I get a lot of learning from other events that I'm engaged with and participating in. So I'm always around learning, and I am always seeking to take things from it. I've just had a focus on better ways of taking away. I remember a very early conference at the PSA, one of the first I went to back in about 2005, I think. And there was a speaker at the end of one of the days, Tom Antion from America. And he actually, with the audience's permission, he was the last speaker of the day. He overran his slot substantially, pushing us very close to the black tie dinner time. But he was giving so much value that people wanted him to carry on. He was talking about social media, and you bear in mind this is 2005, I think.
Yeah.
And I took 4 pages of notes during his talk, and I never looked at them again. And I took a lesson from that, and now I don't even fill up a whole page from a whole weekend conference, because I'm only looking for maybe 6 or 7 things I will apply in my business.
Yes.
And otherwise I will listen, I'll learn hopefully, and I'll remember things now and then. But if I write everything down, then those 6 or 7 key action points get lost, and I'm not the type to read back on those notes anyway. Now with the work approach, once I've got through this current spell of, I've been finishing a rewrite of my 4th book, I've been writing this ebook, I'll be developing that into video content. But once I've got to a bit of a lull in that, then I think what I'll start using that deep work for is time to go back and revisit notes from events and apply what I said I would do, because that's what's missing.
Yeah, and it's all about having that sort of self-awareness of, as you say, whether you're using stuff or not, or how to best do that. It just made me reflect on what I do in those sorts of cases, and I always feel when I go to meetings or conferences or whatever, I'm never the one taking notes because of lots of reasons, and I'm not a particularly note-taking person, but I do come away with an extra long to-do list the next day when I'm triaging that, because as you said, as things crop up that I think, I should do that, or I need to add that into my list, it gets added in. But yeah, I've never been one to take lots of notes, which is a bit disconcerting for some people, I think, when they have meetings with me, because they think I'm not really paying attention.
But actually, isn't it sometimes better to put the pen down and just listen? I have tried with my mentoring. I've experimented with recording the session so I don't have to take any notes.
Yeah,
but that doesn't quite work for me. So I try and find the balance of just keeping action points noted in the moment.
Yeah.
It would be great if that approach did work, but there's just something missing when you go back through a transcript.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's almost more tedious than going back through your notes, isn't it?
There is that element, and I did try with a PA going through and sort of pulling out the key chunks, but of course someone else doesn't know what the pertinent points are necessarily that you need. But I tried that because I wanted to put all of the equipment away and just focus and listen and engage. And I think it's important to get a balance between the two.
Yes, yeah, that's true. So last couple of questions then. Firstly, what about on those days when it all goes horribly wrong and you have a bad day and don't get done what you intended? How do you deal with those days?
Well, I mean, we're going through that time for a lot of people at the moment. I have noticed a sea change in myself, and I did another a development program a number of years ago, quite a well-known one called Landmark Forum.
Yeah.
And I went through about 3 stages of Landmark, and I did notice a change in how I dealt with setbacks, and I deal with them a lot more positively than I think I did before. So I've noticed in this crisis that it hasn't left me disconcerted. I've felt a sort of perhaps a layer of stress underneath that comes out occasionally, but I don't feel stressed. I had started trying meditation again, and I've dropped that habit, and I need to pick that up again, because I think that's how you deal with that underlying layer of stress, that and the hiking and the exercise. But actually, in a conscious level, I'm not panicking, and I'm seeing a lot of people who are sharing how they're feeling, and it's all negative, and I've actually been energized and positive. So, and I credit Landmark with that. I think that really helped me. Just, part of their concept is nothing has any meaning other than the meaning we give it.
Yes.
And that gives you control back. It gives you power back. And it made me able to talk about the COVID crisis as an opportunity in the way I did earlier, without hopefully losing any humanity for what's going on outside that. So I think that, we have bad days, we have setbacks in the business. We had a terrible year last year. I've always said there's no plan B. A number of years ago, when we were going through a similar bad stage, my sister said to me, "What will you do if this doesn't work?" And I said, "That's not an option."
Yeah.
And that helps me, because it forces me into action. I'll have days like today. I said this, I was meant to be writing this morning. My head wasn't in that space. I've not had an unproductive day. I've recorded a video which I've posted across channels and got a lot of engagement on, and put something out there that's hopefully helpful to people, but also engages people. I've had a really strong conversation with someone in my network in a similar space about how we can support each other. So if I did nothing else today, even though I haven't achieved what I wanted to, I can still say I took a step forward. And I think that's where I am at the moment, is, in strange times, can you say at the end of each day, have I taken a step forward? And when you look at, how many hours do you work in a day, and do you finish, do you work till 6, and these measures of activity that aren't related to the actual productivity. I would rather work 3 hours, and in that 3 hours win 2 new clients and write a chapter of a book, than work 9 hours and do nothing.
I think as well, in the situation we're in, I keep saying, when I've been talking on a couple of podcasts and so on, I've been saying, overridingly for me, it's about be kind to yourself. It is about looking for the potential positives out of whatever situations you're going through, but also understanding, well, sort of what you said, that today you haven't done what you intended to do, but you can see that you did something that's moved you forwards, in which case, it's still been a good day. And tomorrow's another day is, an attitude that I quite often take as well. So,
and that's, the question was, how do you deal with setbacks effectively? And that's, you deal with setbacks by looking, it sounds a bit cliche, doesn't it? But you deal with setbacks by looking forward. Someone can put that on a meme and send it to me. But yeah, you deal with setbacks by looking forward. That's the only way you can deal with them.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And then what about those days where you get to live more? And we might have to imagine that this wasn't during this particular scenario. But, what do those days look like? So those are the days where you get to do more of the things you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. What's that day look like for you?
If we're talking in a work environment, there's nothing I love more than making an impact on people. When I'm up on stage, and it could be a keynote talk in front of hundreds of people, it could be a small workshop for 6 people, which I did yesterday. If I'm in that environment and I see people's eyes light up, that's in the moment for me. What I do is I impart information. I try and get people to think about their professional relationships in a different way. So my success is people taking that on board. So the great moments for me are when I see an audience member's eyes light up, or when someone contacts me on social media after and says, you made me think differently as a result, or when someone reaches out and says, as a result of what you said 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago, this has happened to me.
Yeah.
So and that can come from speaking or training or mentoring or writing. Someone's read my book. I remember when Death Came Third came out, I got an long email from an actress, which was not my target market. And she wrote and said that she lived with another actress, and the other actress was getting roles without even having to audition for them. Whereas she couldn't even get the audition. And so she'd read Death Came Third, and it just changed her whole approach. And she understood the power of networks and how to get, that into that position.
Yeah.
And that, out of all of the wonderful feedback for that book, and we got a lot of great feedback, still do, for that book, that's the one that I remember the most.
I can imagine. Do you see her in films and things now?
I'm going to ruin the story now. She's a financial advisor. But she's using all the same techniques in a more appropriate scenario, maybe.
I'm probably earning a lot more money, so yeah.
Yeah, you burst my bubble.
Exactly. Well, Andy, it's been great talking to you and really getting into some of this detail. Some great examples and practical tips for people, not least about using visual aids on your wall. And I'm going away to do that next. So thank you for joining me. Tell people how they can find out more about you and connect with you.
Well, first of all, it's been my pleasure, and thanks again for reaching out and inviting me to share this with you. With a surname like mine, as long as you know how to spell it, I am very easy to find. So my website is lopata.co.uk, Lopata, but I'm sure that'll be in the show notes as well. Yeah. And if you go to the site and you click on Insights, then you've got blogs, videos, a lot more information. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I do try to keep my LinkedIn connections to people I know personally because of the way I use LinkedIn, but you can follow the content. I post a lot of content on LinkedIn, and linkedin.com/in/networking strategy, facebook.com/ I think it's business networking strategy or networking strategy. Just search Andy Lopata. Connecting is not enough is what you're looking for on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, just under my name, and in all good bookshops and some rubbish ones too.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 159, you'll find them there. And this week I want to tell you a bit of a funny story. At 3:30 last night, all three of us in the house were up and trying to get a little field mouse out of the inside of my bedroom door. So the cat has decided that this is like Christmas at the moment and is bringing us presents nearly every day. And yesterday's present was this little mouse, and I hadn't seen it, and then it sort of popped out by my door, and I looked again, and it was there, and I thought, oh, that's a big spider, and I thought, oh no, it's a mouse. So I went to sort of pick it up, and as I got close to it, it disappeared. So I thought it had ran through the door and gone out into the rest of the house. So I was searching everywhere trying to find it, and then it just miraculously reappeared again. And then I got Ellie to come and stand the other side of the door, and I was on the other side trying to sort of catch it, and then it disappeared again, but we realised it hadn't gone anywhere that we could see, and then we could see this little tail dangling. It was up inside the door, and where I'd had the flooring put in a year or so ago, the person had cut the bottom of the door off so that it fitted properly and swung over the floor properly. So the door is now hollow right the way to the ground, as opposed to the top where it's obviously got a bit of wood that would have stopped this happening. So this poor little mouse had been brought in, decided the best hiding place, which I think was absolutely genius, was the door. So we ended up with waking Simon up, and all three of us we had the door off its hinges. We were shaking it, but every time we shook it, the mouse went further up the door. So in the end, we carried the door downstairs, got it out into the back garden, and then just stood around waiting for said mouse to realise it was outside and that it was a good time to get out of the door, which it did. At which point the cat appeared, and we all went back, got organised, went to go to bed, and about 5 minutes later the cat appeared with a dead mouse. So I don't know if it's the same one or if it was a different one. But yeah, so that was yesterday's challenge, or this morning's challenge. I wonder what the next one is. We had a couple of three slow worms in the house last week, or I suspect it's probably the same one, just keeps coming back every time we set it free again. But of course she doesn't sort of tend to kill that because she's keeping it in her mouth really gently. Brings it in and just sits there and watches it wriggling around, which is a joy, as you can imagine. So yeah, so that's what's happening in our house at the moment. I do think I maybe should get out more. So also to update you on Counterpoint Networking, it's a bank holiday in the UK next Monday. That's the 25th of May, so there's no Counterpoint Networking that day, so we'll be coming back on the 1st of June. If you're interested in coming to that one, if you go to counterpointnetworking.co.uk/2005 no 06 even 200601, so that's the 26 and 1, so that's the 1st of June 2020. You can get there, so counterpointnetworking.co.uk 200601 will get you there. And also, if you're thinking about what you're doing in your business at this current time and you would like some help, whether that's with setting up a podcast or creating a webinar, doing some training, setting up a website, thinking about how you might shape how you work moving forwards, how you might get to do more of the things that you want to do. I sadly can't help you too much with the going out that much at the moment, but all the other stuff, then you might be interested in finding out more about my membership site, which is Power to Live More Calm. I've just put a new product in there only this morning, which is all about planning, 7 steps to planning really engaging content to use on Facebook. So that's got in there today, and I'm just in the middle of putting together a Zoom training course as well. So I've got, probably about 20-25 videos showing you how to use Zoom, so they're just being uploaded and they should be live later this week. So if you're interested in finding out more, if you go to powertolivemore.com/getcalm, then you can do so there. Again, the show notes are powertolivemore.com/159, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.